Hello and welcome to another video in the series, Archaeology in Islam. My name is Dan Gibson, and if you have a question, you can email me at the address at the bottom of your screen, dan@canbooks.ca. Now, some people have responded to my theory that Petra is the original holy city of Islam by protesting that the name Petra does not occur in the Quran. And they're right. But was the city of Petra always known as Petra? That name was given to the city by the Greeks and the Romans. What about before that? What name did the surrounding nations use when they referred to the city of Petra? Now, the oldest name for Petra and for the Petra Mountains is Seir. An Egyptian record tells us that Seir was in the land of Shasu, which is generally thought to be the mountains around Petra and Jordan. Also, in the temple of Amenhotep III, it talks about the war against the people of a place called Mount Seir, which we know is Petra. From the Bible, we learn that Mount Seir was named this for Seir the Hortite, whose offspring had at one time inhabited the area. Later, the tribe of Esau, that is the Edomites, they battled against the Horites and the Zamzummites, and they destroyed them and made their home in these same mountains, the mountains of Seir. Much later, Mount Seir is also given as the location where the remnant of the Amalekites escaped to. Now, this is important because the Amalekites were later annihilated, and the references are that they were in Petra, and that's where they had escaped to. And Al-Tabari and others tell us, and they associate the Amalekites with the city of Mecca. But as long as we understand Mecca to be down in Saudi and central Saudi Arabia, then it's highly unlikely the Amalekites were that far. But we can actually place the Amalekites in Petra, and that we know, as we have seen in our studies, is the holy city of Islam. Now, in the autumn issue, 2007, of the Journal of Semitic Studies, there's an excellent article by Mehdi Shadel, who demonstrates that the original name of Petra was Rakim, and that's the name of a very early king who lived in that area. Shadel traces this, a funerary inscription in Petra, plus rabbinic writings, a letter attributed to Cyril of Jerusalem, some Syriac texts, a homily by Eusebius of Caesarea, the Book of Laws of Countries by Bar Desan, and writings by Josephus and some biblical texts. All of this is proof that Rakim is the name of Petra. And in the Quran, we also find the name Rakim appears as God gives evidence that Rakim is one of the great miracles. Look at Surah 18, verse 9. Do you reckon that the companions of the cave and El-Rakim to be among our wondrous signs? Now, the location of the city of Rakim, or Petra as we know it today, is in a crevice between two mountains filled with majestic carvings that must have seemed to the listeners of the Quran to indeed have been a sign from God. However, many commentators on the Quran all down through history who didn't know anything about Petra and its association with Rakim, they thought maybe that's the name of a dog. The dog that was the seven sleepers had. These seven sleepers, they fell asleep for several hundred years, and when they woke up, it was called This is a Miracle, and also Rakim is called This is a Miracle. And so you can read about that in Shadel's article and find out what it says. Now, what about the Hebrew language? In Hebrew, Petra was called Sela, which means the rock. In the Hebrew language, the term Sela is applied to a number of large, prominent rocks, such as, and I'll give you some examples, there's the rock of Etam, Sela Etam in Judges 15 in the Bible. It's a specific rock that everyone knew. There's the rock of Rimmon, or Sela Rimon, in Judges chapter 20. And this was a place that people knew. They would call it the rock. There's the rock of Mahaloka. You find that in 1 Samuel and it's a place called the Rock. But the Hebrew scriptures also mention a rock, Sela, in the south, but no other name is attached to it. Everyone seemed to know where it was. It was the Rock. It was a place called Sela. Now, in the Greek language, the rock is Petra. That's the word we know it today. It's from the Greek. And it refers to a mass of connected rock, which is distinct from Petros, which is a detached rock or a boulder. So it means a big rock. Pliny the Elder, who's writing about 70 AD, he mentions the rock, and he calls it Petra, and it's the capital of the Nabateans and the center of their caravan trade. Now, there's an ancient Roman road map that dates back to the 3rd century, and it marks Petra as an important site on the Roman road known as the Via Nova Terraiana, which is named after one of the emperors. Later, under Constantine, the city of Petra became the seat of a bishopric. There was a church there, and in the 5th century, Petra was an administrative center for the Byzantine province of Palestine, Tertia. So it was a state that it was a capital of. And there's been some discussion as to maybe the name, the rock, Petra, was also applied to a much earlier account of the Greeks and Antigonus, who attacks this large rock. But that is about 50 miles away near the Edomite capital of Busera. So it is not here. That is a separate rock. So that is the one that Antigonus attacked, also known as the Rock. So we can be confused because there are two rocks. One Sela and the other one not. So the Roman maps talk about Petria. That's plural. The two rocks. And so Antigonus attacks one rock, you'll see it on the map, and Petra becomes the second rock. And so that's why we have a state called Petria, which is the two great rocks. Now the city of Petra also had another Roman name. The Roman Hadrian visited Petra in 130 AD on his grand tour of the Roman Empire, and he gave the city his name after him, Hadrian Petra. And so that's the name that Roman records used. Now in 1993, archaeologists were excavating a Byzantine church in Petra when they discovered some burned up scrolls that, and they used various techniques and laid them out and discovered they could read them. These are burnt papyri. And they discovered that these were the records of Theodosa, the son of Obadias, and his family who lived in Petra around 537 to 593. This would be during the time just before the prophet Muhammad was born, up until about he was in his 20s. And these records contain economic and legal documents about this family living in Petra, but a Christian family, not a pagan family. From the papyri, we discovered that Petra had the name Imperial Colony Antonia. Now, that's an interesting name. It was an imperial colony. It is interesting to note that honorific titles were used by these Byzantines. So they used things like the most honorable, you see it on your screen, the most religious, or the most brilliant, or the most pious, and so forth. They love to use these kinds of names. And in early Muslim writings, we find honorific titles are being used in Islam also. Very similar. Medina al-Munawwara. We have Karbala, the Muqaddasa, the Al-Quran al-Karim, and so forth. Sorry. And so just in the same way, they were using these kinds of things. Now, the emperor, Elagabalus, he bestowed a name on it. He called Petra the mother of all colonies. This was an honorific title. We see it as early as the 3rd century, and it also occurs in the 6th century in the Petra papyri, the mother of all colonies. Now, eventually this term became associated with the English term we have today, metropolis. But if you understand, it originally meant the mother of all colonies. Now, a very similar term appears in the Quran, and it's used as a reference to Mecca. In Surah 692 and in 42:5, Mecca is called the mother of all settlements, or Qura. It's a common thing today for translators to carelessly say the mother of all cities, but the Quran specifically uses a term for settlements, qura, not cities. That would have been mudun. Notice that the Greek does not use the word cities either. And so the Greek and the Arabic agree here in their use of the term, and both of them call the holy city the mother of all settlements. The Petra Papyri also revealed another term for the city of Petra, a unique term, not used in the Roman Empire, and it means blessed or noble. Getting an exact meaning of this word is difficult, as around this time, the meaning of this word was changing. Originally it meant noble, even blessed, but at this time the Christian world began to use the term meaning holy. And so the Petra Papyri, they used this term and they apply it to churches and other big buildings, even tombs and civic buildings. They're called noble. Hence the exact meaning of this word at this time remains uncertain. Neither holy, nor noble, nor blessed, it would apply to a city. It's a strange name, but that's the name that Petra had, a very unique name, and the people in Petra were very proud of their name, the holy and the blessed, or the noble city. This resonates with the terms that the early Muslims applied to the city of Mecca, such as Mecca al-Mukarramah or Becca al-Mubaraka, and so forth. Now, the city of Petra was a divided city. From the Petra Papyri, some people have assumed that Petra was Christianized. It was a Christian city. After all, the Papyri speaks only of Christians. Other Byzantine writings speak of churches and cathedrals, even the bishop who was there, and so forth. The bishop was sent off to the Council of Alexandria in 231 AD. However, it must be remembered the Petra Papyri were found in a church, and they were legal records of only one family. They're not history. They don't have births and marriages and deaths, but they have buying and selling and legal arguments over the ownership of land and so forth. They're not historical records of what is happening on a wider scale, even in the city. So we need to turn to archaeology and try to discover what is the setting for these ancient papyri. And from a survey of buildings in Petra, it becomes obvious that the Christians occupied only a small sector of the city. All of the Christian churches, their Christian buildings, and the Christian tombs are located in one area of the city. The rest of the city appears to have maintained its polytheistic pagan identity. What is fascinating is that while the Christian sector of Petra was mostly in the northeast of the city, the polytheists occupied the center of the city, and most of the Islamic locations are located in the south of the city, except for the Kaaba building, which is on the main street, right beside some of the great pagan temples. Now, the polytheists, Muslims and Christians, would have all used the grand processional way that comes down the Sikh and through the colonnaded street, and then they would go to their respective places of worship. Due to the religious nature of the city, the name Blessed Mother of Settlements or Colonies seems to apply perfectly in this situation. Petra was the blessed or holy city. It's not unusual for a city to be divided into various ethnic or religious quarters, where events in one quarter are barely noticed in the other quarter of the city. And so we find that it's not surprising to read in the Islamic records that there was antagonism between the polytheists and the Romans. Now, if the Romans and the Byzantines, if they had their own name for the city of Petra, then what name did the new fledgling Muslim community use for the name of the city? They wouldn't want to use a Jewish name. They wouldn't want to use the Roman name. So what is the name that they used? We read in Al-Tabri, Abraham directed Hagar and Ishmael to go to Al-Hijr, and he settled them down there. Now in Arabic, the name Al-Hijr has various meanings, but the one important one we want to notice is it means the rock. So here we have three names for Petra. The rock, Sila, Petra in Greek, and Hijr in Arabic, and they all mean the rock, the very same thing. However, since Petra was soon to be forgotten, the meaning of Al-Hijr or Hajr evolved into other definitions. And so there's some confusion today as people argue over the meaning of the name. The Quran has an entire surah dedicated to a place known as Al-Hijr. If you read this chapter, everything in it applies to the city of Petra. Noah and the ark was supposed to have circled Masjid al-Haram. Lot lived nearby, and so did all the other prophets. This chapter tells us that these prophets were messengers sent to warn the city of Hijr. But the people felt secure in their houses in the rocks, so they did not heed the messengers, and they were destroyed by earthquakes. Since Muslims did not know that Petra was the ancient city of Hijr, they have applied this chapter to a place in Saudi Arabia known as Hegra. Now, this place is mentioned by Strabo and Pliny the Elder, and in the Roman records, who calls it Hegra, and sometimes they call it just Egra. This whole area was occupied by various groups over the centuries, but the greatest impact was made by the Nabateans, who designated it as one of their burial locations, just like Petra was one of their burial locations. However, Petra was the capital, and Hegra was not the capital. It was a local burial place. Like Petra, the entire area is filled with Nabatean tombs and accompanying dining rooms, just like Petra. Now, after the Nabatean era, during the Islamic times, the city fell into ruin, the burial place, and the Muslim pilgrims passing by wondered about this great cemetery. And so they identified it as Al-Hijr, which is mentioned in the Quran. And they also gave it the name Madat Salah, or the cities of Salah, because they did not know where he fit into history. Now, in my book, Quranic Geography, I identified the prophet Salah and later Hud as prophets to the Petra area, which suffered great earthquakes over its history. Surah 27:52 says, "Here are the homes, their homes in ruins on account of their iniquities. Surely this is a sign for people who know." So they looking, and there are the ruined homes. Now, when pilgrims passed by Hegra on their way to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, they wondered at these great tombs carved there, and so they associated them with this verse and with this ruined homes mentioned in Salah's story in Surah 27. However, in Hegra, there are no homes to be seen. It was just a burial city. The Hegra location, just a burial site. So this talk about see their homes and how they're in ruin doesn't really apply to Hegra in Saudi Arabia. And Hegra is not made out of a single projecting rock like Hijr suggests, but it's made out of scattered rocks in the desert, and the tombs are widespread. And so this challenges the concept of it being a city that was destroyed by an earthquake. And there's no evidence of an earthquake there or a great city. Now, there's another name that Petra was known by. In my search for the names of Petra, I have come across one writer who calls the city of Petra by name, and the name is Mecca. His name is Thomas. He is a contemporary of Al-Tabri. He's writing to us around his time of his death, and he's very clear about the Prophet Muhammad. After describing some of his activities, he is very clear in mentioning Mecca, and it's in Arabia of the two Petras. And he emphasizes that he's talking about the Mecca, the one where the Prophet Muhammad revealed himself. Listen, at that time, in a place called Arabia Paran, named Mecca, the Mecca, he showed himself to his brothers. And so he revealed himself there. In the area of the two Petras, not in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, but in Mecca in Jordan, in the area of Paran. So we will do a separate video on Paran later. That's what I plan to do. But notice that there are two rocks, the two Petras, and they are identified in this article, and Mecca is identified as being there. And so it is the city of Mecca. Now that helps us. Also, the city of Petra also has the name Mecca. That explains why Mecca is used in all of the Islamic records. And it's not a mistake. It's a real name. And here we have an outside source who tells us that Mecca is the city of Petra in southern Jordan. So when Islamic accounts speak of Mecca, they are referring to both Petra in Jordan and to Saudi Arabia. How can we tell the difference? Well, that depends on the year that is being referred to, and so we have to think carefully. Mecca, referred to before 65 AH, would most likely be Petra in Jordan. However, as time went on, Mecca referred to after 65 AH. 65 Al-Hijra is when it was moved, the Black Rock was moved down to Mecca and Saudi Arabia, and so it could refer to that or it could refer to Petra. But after 128 Hijri, that's when the great earthquake destroyed the city of Petra, and from then on, after 128, all references to Mecca are talking about Mecca in Saudi Arabia. So the Islamic records are not wrong when they mention Mecca, because there were two Meccas. The original one in Petra, the second one in Saudi Arabia. And so when the Islamic records talk about the mother of all settlements, Qura, they are not wrong, because there were two such cities, and they're talking about the city of Petra. The key to knowing what we're talking about is when the Kaaba was moved from Petra to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and the name Mecca was applied to both cities. Is Petra mentioned in the Quran? I think it is. Well, the actual word Petra isn't used in the Quran. The Quran uses terms like Becca, the mother of all cities, even Mecca, all refer to the city of Petra in Jordan. If you want more information, there's a paper written about this. You can download this paper from the website. It's called Petra in the Quran, and the site is on the screen. Go there, have a look at all the different papers in the download section. I am Dan Gibson, and this has been another video in the series on archaeology and Islam.